Hello, this is Forrest Lynn. Around here we call us LRM. Today I'm making a video to talk about how we pay our clients. And it's not a shocker, in most property management companies, they all pay pretty much the same way as we do. And that is, on the first, we try to collect all the rents. Then by the fifth, it's late. And then we have vendors that we have to pay from doing work until that point. And all that has to be culminated up. And of course, sometimes we're paying utilities if the apartment's still vacant. We're paying some utilities. We're paying HOA dues, lots of other things. So there's lots of things that have to be paid out of that rent. So we have to make sure all that's gathered up. So if we start on the first and we're working through to the fifth, and we start looking at the fifth, okay, now these people have paid, these people haven't paid. We have received some of the invoicing that was some of the work we did. We're still waiting on some of the invoicing. Now you can see where we're at. So we take the next 3 or 4 days, and of course you have weekends and holidays sometimes fall in there. So we take the next 3 or 4 or 5 days, and we try to bring in more rent that we haven't collected. Some shied people, and we start calling them. We actually start calling and contacting them on the 5th when they haven't paid their rent yet, and say, hey, you haven't paid your rent yet. What's going on with it? What do we need to do to make this happen? Because ultimately we need to get them to pay the rent. We're not looking to evict anybody if we don't have to. It gets expensive, laborious, time lost, a bunch of other stuff. So if you can work with somebody to keep them in there, do that. So we go through that process with them. We also make sure that our vendors, and one of our main vendors is Works Rental Fix, Affordable Plumbing, a couple of folks, and we make sure we call them and say, hey, make sure you get all your stuff in, and they usually are good about that. There may be some job at the end that was coming at the end of the month that doesn't wrap up until maybe the 8th or 9th or 10th too, that we know, and we have to make sure that gets in there as well. So as you can see, getting to the 10th is like that. I mean, it's quick to be on the 10th and still not have everything done. Sometimes you've got a tenant that's saying, I get paid again on the 14th or I get paid on the 15th or something. And so you make the decision, do I wait? Do I send the clients, all the clients, the money? Or do I wait till I get this and send that client separately? The problem is you run into some problems with accounting, right? So you want to make sure that everybody's paid on the same day. So you send all your clients out their money they're due for rent on the same day. It makes for a much cleaner accounting system. So you're working diligently. So that's why in our agreement with our clients, it says that we'll collect our rent late on by the 5th. We try to send it to the client between the 10th and the 15th of the month. Sometimes you can get some holidays and silly action will happen. It may push that into maybe the 16th or 17th, depending on what goes on as far as those banking holidays and things that goes on, because it all goes through the bank. Now, if you take that system and then you throw in there rent reversals, now you can create a mess. Some of these banks are silly. They'll take forever to our banking system, our software goes out and says, hey, these people have said they're going to pay the rent, and they put it through, and we need the money. That's our system talking to their bank. Their bank is, they held on a minute and not talk to them until the next day. It can take 3 or 4 days before somebody's paid their rent in the system, and it has a possible reversal in the system. And let's say it does reverse. So now if they didn't pay the rent till the 4th and it reverses and it takes 3 or 4 days to come to it, now you're on the 8th or 9th and you got a reversal. So now you got to call the tenant and get into that reversal and tell them what happened, or get them to come and pay direct for some certified funds or whatever it is that you got to do. And again, you're at the 10th or 11th trying to get that done. So that's the primary reason for waiting between the 10th and the 15th to make payments to the clients, is because of the paperwork it takes to gather up those things and get it out to the clients. Occasionally, we do have things that'll drag along. If you have a client that only has one property that you're managing and that person hasn't paid rent yet, of course, they're not getting anything when it comes to disbursement. There's nothing to send to them. And then the tenant may pay, because everything happens by the 15th. But that tenant may come along and pay the rent on like the 17th or 18th. In those cases, we'll typically go ahead and once we collect the rent, then we'll go ahead and forward that rent money onto our client. Make sure it happens. So as you can see, there's a lot of moving parts that push this downrange from the 10th to the 15th. I mean, we don't get to keep the money, so we try to collect it and get it out to you. And as far as property management goes, Our property management is based on the tenant paying their rent. If the tenant doesn't pay the rent, we're not making any property management money, which means we're working for free. So we definitely try to press forward to make sure that those tenants are going to pay their rent. And sometimes that takes a little extra time. And then you have all the invoices and stuff. Now, with us, with our property management company, we do go a little step further. Let's say, for instance, that it does reverse, right? We've already paid out, and yet it can reverse, because remember, it can actually take 3 or 4 days, even a week before it can reverse. But we've already paid the client out based on what we got in. That reversal then basically turns it into our money that we paid our client, and we have to wait on the money to deal with the tenant or whatever. But we do that. We don't call up our client and say, "Oh, you got to send that rent money back. I'm sorry, their check bounced or whatever. That it reversed." We don't do that. Same thing with invoicing. If we have invoices that come in, and for some odd reason there was a job that took longer or something, and we didn't get the invoice before we sent it out, we get it after we've made a disbursement. We don't call the client and say, "Hey, you got to send us this." Even during the month, remember, we're paying for the stuff to be worked on in vendors, pretty much all month, not just at the end of the month. Now, sometimes Works Rental Fix, some of the stuff that they do for us, they do bill us at the end of the month. Some of it's billed whenever they get done, especially when it gets into the larger jobs. They bill us whenever it's done. So we have to pay them right away and then wait for our money once rent's collected. We have rarely called a client and said, "Hey, you need to send us some money." In fact, I can't remember the time we've ever done that. And mostly because we just take that on, and it's part of the service that we provide. We'll make sure everything's collected, and then we take it out of the money at the end of the month when rent's paid for the next month. But anyway, I just want to let everybody know how it works, because sometimes it seems like there's we don't know what's going on. Where's my money? And well, this is what happens. All these different little things got to go on, and we work diligently for the first 10 or 15 days of the month to get all that done, as well as everything else we have to normally do to manage the properties. So thanks for listening.